is what they charged me with was fraud of government funds.
Theft of government funds.
So food stamps, TANF, which I never got, and then SSI. And then they wanted me to take a plea, and I didn't, so she put a second, or another charge on, a fourth charge of wire fraud.
And she said, if you don't take my plea, I'm going to add wire fraud.
I don't understand how they can even implicate you if there's no proof that you even received it. I mean, what did they say on the TANF? How could they prove? I mean, how did they say that you got it if you never had it and accused you've taken it?
Because we have to. It's not that you
it's up to us. We were told today by the public defender's office that we have to prove.
to prove it.
But I went to court. I went to court and I had a hearing.
And where now was this court? Where did this take place? Was this
Multnomah County?
Multnomah County. Okay.
No, federal court.
Federal, the same courts the Bundys were in.
Okay. Okay.
And I was not allowed evidence. They would throw out anything we tried to bring in. Was not allowed witnesses. Oh, I had one. That was my custody attorney. And the questions were very vague. Just not appropriate for what needed to be spoke of to get the evidence out.
So, first off, the state, DHS, all that whole department, we went and requested all of her documents from them before the trial.
In 2016.
Mm-hmm. They waited till after the trial, and we actually had to go to a head department in Salem to get them to get her records.
They completely
said,
denied me the records.
So they said, okay, we have your records ready. After the trial, we go down to get the records. It says right on the cover sheet, deny, withhold until after trial.
Yeah.
Were you assigned an attorney?
Yes.
For your defense?
Well, no, I hired an attorney.
One for
it cost me $12,000.
But they couldn't challenge you not allowing the evidence.
Well, here's the problem. We get into court. We're in the middle of this hearing. We're second day or third day.
Third day.
And I'm sitting next to my attorney out in the hall, and he says, "Boy, this is tough."
Yes. I don't get this at all.
What do you mean? He says, "Well, I've never done a
federal case before." So then, but his defense was 2 days before the trial, he says, I want you to write down 10 questions that you want me to ask you during the trial. He didn't
do his job for him?
Exactly. He didn't go over any of the evidence that we gave him, and we didn't even have all this other stuff that we got from the state later after they released it.
But I still had quite a bit.
But he never called any of our witnesses.
No.
One.
Well, he called my kids in because the state had called them.
Did you ever actually even see his certification of?
I did on his wall.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It was real.
Did it look like it came out of a Cracker Jack box? Okay.
Well, so here we are in the middle of this, and I lose. He doesn't object. He's just, I'm just sitting there thinking, dear God. And then the jury comes back with one question in the middle of this.
Do you have any proof?
Any proof in the records that shows she has over $1,000, or not $1,000.
That she owes the amounts on TANF and SNAP and any SSI. Is there anything that shows the amounts? And the reply back,
how they got the amounts to.
But the answer to that was no. The only thing we have is the stuff that we have in Exhibit 31, which we went over 31. We can't find anything that shows any. No amounts. It talks about me getting
that they're going to raise an amount for that month, but it doesn't talk about the substantial amounts of money or the less amounts of money I was receiving here or there. It was just basically notes from DHS workers.
The judge during the trial even asked the prosecuting attorney, "What was the amount again? Did you?"
Yeah.
I mean,
it should be right there on a evidentiary note given to the judge right in front of them. And they usually ask for that to have, that's pathetic.
Well, so the evidence, they left out a lot of evidence that would have completely turned this trial around.
Absolutely. The jury would have come back with a guilty verdict. They came back with a guilty verdict, but they wouldn't have had they have all the evidence on the table and it was presented to them. So we fired the attorney for incompetent assistance of counsel.
And then I went to court for my first sentencing, And I walked in with a 5-page letter telling the judge I was very aware of the fraud. And
now, we can include or not. Who was the judge presiding?
Judge Mossman. Michael Mossman. But I did go in and explain to him I understood the fraud and that I knew, that they don't pay taxes on these bonds that they take. And I knew that. And I did my search and my research, and I diligently found a lot of stuff that shows so much corruption, even on their own website. When you open up Pacer, it says the Miller Act, Marine. I mean, these are...
maritime law?
Maritime law.
Yeah, that sounds familiar from the Bundys.
Right.
And it's very, very... When you go in, and I'm not giving him jurisdiction, and I'm talking about how, he doesn't get jurisdiction over me, and he just doesn't have it. And I want to see his oath of office, and I want to see his tax filings, because I know he's not going to file on any of the money he gets from this. And then he asked me 3 times in that hearing. First 2 times, do I want to accept some help from one of their attorneys? It won't cost me anything, and I could just talk to somebody. And I said, no, I really would rather not, thank you.
She's sui juris.
I'm sui juris. I was sui juris. And he says, well, I find it very concerning that you want to, my oath of office. I take that very concerning. And then you're asking for my tax filings. So I'm just going to ask you again, would you just go see one of our court-appointed attorneys? I said, no, I would prefer not to. So the 3rd time, he says, well, here's what's going to happen today. Your friends back there are going to go home. They're going to walk out that door and go home and watch football and eat and sit on the couch and...
have a beer.
By the way, I'm going to call the bailiff. Call the bailiff. You're going to go spend your first day in prison.
Wow.
And he says, so you have one of 2 choices. You're either going to walk across the street and take the court-appointed attorney that we're going to pay for, or you're going to spend your first day in prison today.
That's without going over any... sentencing, you don't just go in there and say, oh, you're going to prison. That's not how it works. You get to go over sentencing stuff. He didn't ask me for any of that.
He just tried to intimidate you. And he said this out loud?
Out loud. It's on file. It's on the record. And at the end of that whole thing, he didn't say court adjourned and hit the gavel.
No, he said recess.
He laid his gavel down and said, we're just going to be in recess for the rest of the day. And he walks off. Yeah.
So then I went over and seen the court-appointed attorney, and the first day I walked into his office, I gave him all these records that show all this evidence. It's very damning for the state side.
First off, he was very confused. He said, now when is your sentencing date? It was today. Wait a minute. Judge Mossman sent you over here to talk to me, and your sentencing was today? Yeah. Okay, that doesn't happen. I've been doing this 15 years. That does not happen. So he either saw something or heard something or you did something that worried him dearly, and that's why he sent you here. So, and he said, go ahead with what he said.
So he just said that, I've gotten cases dismissed that were almost $1 million in these kind of cases and gotten them down to a misdemeanor. He says, I can take this case probably and get rid of this. He says, so I'll look at your evidence and I'll get back to you. Well, it's been 5 months. And he just today, I had to force it in front of him to look at this evidence.
She sent it to him by mail, by fax, by email.
I brought it to him.
We brought it to him in person, and he's like, well, when he said on the phone, before we came up today, he said, well, there's so many pages, I don't have time to go over all that stuff. And
I just called him out on everything he said.
So we called him out on it today.
I wonder about the timing of all of the Bundys and stuff being released yesterday due to basically they couldn't charge them with anything, just like here in Portland, in Nevada. I wonder, makes you wonder, kind of, do you think there's any connection between the feeling that, well, these are just rube citizens that should just be glad that we're even hearing the case.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah.
He made me feel like I was very lucky to have him, and that I'm going to face prison if I don't keep him on.
Well, that sounds like how they basically treated the Bundys too,
right.
and they were Bundys chewed them up because they knew their rights. They did their research, as you have, and
I was a very strong advocate for the Bundys, and it wasn't, you know, I know LaVoy was murdered, and I know that right after his murder, I was indicted.
So you think maybe that they knew that you were supported?
Well, if they watch Facebook, which I heard they did.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Then they would see the advocate part of that was very strong on my end.
For the Bundys.
Okay.
For the Bundys. And
yeah. Well, then there's that as well then.